It is my great pleasure to now introduce our final speaker for today. Sohail Inayatullah is a political scientist, a futurist, an inaugural UNESCO Chair in Future Studies, an author, a speaker, and a professor. So when working on his introduction, it was difficult to fit in such an extensive range of knowledge and experience because Sohail has also authored and co-edited 25 books, as well as publishing over 350 scientific journal articles and book chapters. He's also a professor at the Tamkang University in Taiwan and associate at the Melbourne Business School in the University of Melbourne. So today, Sohail is going to be speaking about the Cloak, like whether or not we are having closed doors or an open portal to a new dimension. And I'm going to hand it over to Sohail now.
Thanks everyone, and for Australian friends, and especially to my Hawaii family, and also to Jeremy in Portland. So I think we have at least 3 continents there. I think Hawaii is part of the oceanic continent. So thanks for being here. I'm assuming everyone can hear me good and you can see the image? Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So I'm just trying to frame this COVID-19 in futures in 3 different ways. And I'll talk about the Tama, Raja, and Sattva. So see, Tama Guna is kind of a closed door. Raja, as the door is opening, we're going through it, and Sattva, we're in the other world. So just a framework to start to think about the anxiety and complexity that everyone is facing. I know I was talking to my mother and sister yesterday, and they're having this huge fight. You know, and I said, and they were asking me to mediate, and I was doing my best, but I said, you have to see this, you're fighting, but really this is about COVID-19. Everyone feels stuck. There's fear, there's anger, there's anxiety. And so it's helpful in this world to have a way to think about all these changes. So I go back to the global financial crisis, 2008, and the Financial Times had a brilliant piece, and they said, here's a crisis, but we don't know what the crisis is. Is this merely about mortgage? So we need new rules how to lend money? Is this a global banking crisis, lack of liquidity? Or is this really about crisis in the world capitalism? Or is this the rise of Asia and China? So people couldn't figure out what it was. And then based on your story, you made different decisions. As we know, the final story was save Wall Street, forget about Main Street. That Main Street inability to deal with inequity has now led to the crisis in 2020, which is we're in like phase 1 of a 7 to 10 year crisis most likely, but let's see. So in this approach, Tama is fear and ego. Everyone's out to get me. Raja, here's some things we can do. Sattva is the 2 earlier fantastic talks by Dada and Didi. Let's get clear about a vision, get clear about who we are inside us, and get clear about the world we want, and let's do that with as many people as we can. That's the transformation. But we need to start with the tough stuff. It'd be foolish to just go straight to this beautiful vision we have. There's tough stuff everywhere. So in my work, I look at hundreds to thousands of research pieces, and I try to categorize what's going on. And every day I give a speech, I would say. I was hoping this would be my year of rest, but in fact, the opposite has happened. And today I have 2 speeches. So for my thing, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I was supposed to spend more time playing basketball and meditating more than twice a day, but we can discuss that later. So Tama is this fear that the zombies are against. There's a zombie apocalypse. And this is from the movies, but it's also this brilliant CDC website in the US saying zombies are those people who we fear. And so this is kind of phase 1, was called con spirituality. Con as the big con game. So you see New Age people suddenly having very much emotionally linked to the Confederacy, very much linked to white superiority, very much linked to Hindu superiority. We've seen the New Age group basically move on and blame other racial groups. And we shouldn't be surprised, because 1 in 4 of people in the US and in Europe believe that the sun goes around the world. The sun goes around the earth. So there's lack of science and fear, and leaders use fear and lack of science to blame the vulnerable. So we see, if you see that image, Trump, Pence, make Earth flat again. And it's very much a power move. So this is the blame someone else. So when it's difficult, who do we blame? We choose anyone else except taking responsibility. And those of you who work in public health, you know very clearly the countries doing the best were decisive. They acted early. They're disciplined. They're very clear. If we do this, here's the gains. The countries doing the worst, US, Brazil, Sweden, have really, this is not our problem, in effect. I don't take responsibility. So that's Tomasic, blaming others, and you can feel the energy on Facebook when people speak like that. When I think about it, I feel my energy getting bad too. So this leads to great despair. If this guna continues in the world, we have 7 years of this, if not more. It's fractured, the US fracturing, other countries fracturing. That's not a great world to live in. Now Raja is like, okay, there's difficulty, what can I do? So the Raja space moves to solutions. So when I run 4-set workshops, I always, let's start out with the difficulty, the pain, let's now go to solutions. So we're seeing one of the best things, what's called the hammer and the dance. You hammer it by closing down, proper testing, stay with equity, and then you do this dance back and forth, opening up restrictions, closing restrictions. It's a brilliant metaphor and it's working. And that's the thing, let's suppress until we find real deeper solutions. And these deeper solutions we know are coming from global science, sharing information, coordination of projects. Now I know some people in the conspiracy movement find this difficult. My mother again yesterday, and I said, Mom, tell me the last 160 years, in your memory and your grandmother's memory. And she said, oh, my great grandmother died from the plague. My grandmother's 5 sisters and brothers died from smallpox. Her sister died from typhoid. My sister died because we didn't have antibiotics. So there's this clear reason they had healthy food, they had organic food, they had sunlight, they had everything for a good immune system, but there's different things is in terms of Raja saying we work together as a scientific global community and find the cures. But Raja is also saying, let's not be stupid. This is not changing. What are the deeper causes? It's not just illness, it's wet markets. It's the industrial global meat production. It's how we design cities. We need to have early warning systems and change the factors leading to this. So you can't just say, we solve the problem today. We're seeing what are the deeper factors. And this is pointing to the next great shift that we're all seeing, a shift in how we produce food. Raja is also saying, well, why are we entering this financial crisis? Why don't we have universal basic income? Why don't we have protection for the most vulnerable? I just finished an article on Islam and COVID-19, and many people interviewed in the streets say, well, look, either I die from starvation or I die from COVID. What does it matter for me? Why does someone in 2020 have to make that decision? So we know we've had incredible economic growth in the last 20 years, stunning, moving hundreds and millions out of poverty. But we also know inequity is at its greatest level, at least for 100 years. And we know when there's incredible inequity, the money is not rolling, the system is not working well. So Raja is saying, what are some deeper changes we can make? So I've been running workshops, as I said, I would say every day. And it's great watching people come up with new ideas. So it said, well, with the school I'm working with, we have to become flexible. We can't go to the way schooling was last year. We need face-to-face, we need virtual, we need to have a different way we design school. My colleagues I'm working with said we should have meetings, but they should only be 1 day a week. Everyone hates meetings. We have 4 days of optimized working, 1 day where you meet. The amazing, to me, the best leader in the world, Prime Minister Jacinda from New Zealand, she says, well, what about 4 days, a 4-day working week? And of course, back to universal basic income. Of course, we want people to have economic strength, so they don't need to have that money, but you need a safety net, and UBI is one way to talk about it. There's better ways, Prout has better ways, but it's still pretty good. So this, suddenly you see the head of Twitter saying, wait a second, you don't need to come back to work in terms of an office environment. Let's rethink the office. Offices, how do we rethink this? So this is Raja saying, what are the solutions? You may disagree with some of these, but it's moving to solution space. So Charmaine Seville, she's an artist, and I work with her closely. She's my partner is Ivana Muj's colleague. So they said, let's get flexible. How do we create a flexible workforce? Flexible students, flexible teaching, flexible learning. How do we start to shape this world from the rigid factory we've had for 200 years? That hasn't worked. So then you start talking about platform cooperatives. So one project we ran, someone said, well, let's match suppliers, buyers. Students said, I want to match teachers around the planet with my education needs. So you move from co-ops to a platform co-op. Platform means like Facebook, like Zoom, like LinkedIn. So you create a platform and then you create cooperatives from there. So it's actually global transmission of the world economy from corporatization to platforms. So I like to see that in the pharmaceutical industry. And Sarkar talks about it. You want to have microbiota or spiritual energy around intervention in health, but you want these to be run through actually co-ops. So as you go further, the biggest raja is, well, this actually needs to change in governance. So many people I talk to, well, this is a nice pause before we go back. So the best thing about these restrictions have been you can breathe again. There's clean air, whether you're in Delhi, in Islamabad, in Beijing, in Brisbane, other cities, people can finally have clean air. So there's a sense there's some gains here. Things slow down. So the Raja is saying, okay, here's things we need to do. We need a cleaner planet, and we know it's doable. My daughter, I was talking, she said, you know, everyone said it was impossible to have clean air. We got clean air in 3 weeks. So why can't we solve climate change? It's possible, and we know it. So this is developing anticipatory systems. What's coming down the road? How do we make use of it before we get a crisis? I've been working in the pandemic space for at least 20 years now. I remember my first project 18 years ago. They said you can talk about anything you want, but you can't challenge the industrial. And so then 7 years ago, that's all we talked about. The new meat cellular agriculture was called food as software. Software is food. And so again, people started to figure out, okay, climate change, given climate change, what are some better solutions? So we rethink the food system. So this is that we actually can make the change. So in this phase, equity and truth-telling become crucial. Raja energy is you tell the truth, even if it hurts. You have to say it. So this is one of my best images in terms of Black Lives Matter. You have to say, here's what's not working in the world. We know the climate is not working. We know inequity is not working. We know a structure of the world system where money gets concentrated in the hands of a few is not working. We know all those things. So this is truth-telling starts this process of transformation. So this eventually leads to sattva. So sattva is operating, again, as Didi so beautifully said, you're operating not from anger or even from action, you're operating from that moment where you're in deep peace, deep equanimity of mind, and you really know what you want to do. So love and intuition become a way of knowing. But you need the Raja energy that tells you what to do, but Sattva frames it. So it's that quietness, that intention, and then we act. So part of that, of course, we know is meditation. The other half, of course, we know is seva. So it's the meditation and then figuring out what's. So I love this image of this physician. He's putting I can't tell his life at risk for others. And how does he control her? How does she control her day? She goes into a deep rest. So this becomes foundational for all of us. I would say almost every organization I work with, we always start with that. I know that many have been working with law enforcement now for 15 years. And really that's the one thing I tell every law enforcement sector I work with. You're in a tough position. You have to come from the sattva energy. You have to be protective, protect the weak, protect the vulnerable, but you have to come from that meditative space. Otherwise, you're going to become who you hate. And of course, we know with police brutality everywhere, it's going on in many countries, especially in one. So this moves to a culture of well-being. So we're no longer just measuring GDP, we're measuring well-being, we're measuring purpose, we're measuring prosperity, we're measuring people, inclusion, and we're measuring the planet. So this is the possibility, the portal to a different type of to a transformation. So well-being becomes the goal of every city, every community, and the planet. So that means there's an inner well-being and outer well-being. So this is the portal to the awakening. And there's the brilliant poet, writer, social activist, Roy. And she says, you can choose the narrative you wish to see this world in. You can see it as, of course, Tama. The demons in human form of Sarkar are coming out, leading to conspiracy, leading to a chance to blame other ethnic groups. or you can see a portal to awakening. If it's an awakening, what do we do in this awakening process? Phase 1 is obvious. This is the inner world. Phase 2 is the outer world. Now, I call that, again, learning from Sarkar, the new Renaissance. And I think 80-70 he gave that talk. The earlier Renaissance was challenging the dogma of the religious world, and was a major breakthrough in European history. Now, what about the Asiatic world, Africa world? Their awakening or Renaissance has been consistent. It's been going to the self. So one is external awakening, challenging the dogmas. Inner enlightenment, of course, the inner Renaissance is always finding ourselves. So the external awakening, one of the toughest dogmas. I was talking to the former president of Interpol, and we were talking about how Singapore succeeded and failed. So he said, here's where we failed. We had the best COVID response in the world, but we forgot about our migrant workers because we saw them as other, not us. So the virus came back. The narrative of the virus as a war means strongest fight against the virus. The virus destroys the strongest. It goes around. So every system is based on the most vulnerable. So we're working in Australia here with the National Disability Center, National Disability Futures, very clear what are the impacts of the virus and future crises, climate change, etc., on the most vulnerable. So the external awakening, again, is very clear. We have to go towards new humanism. That's a very tough thing to do. And the Tamaguna, new humanism, is my race, my ego first, everyone else I hate. Raja, I need to challenge structures of oppression and I need to tear them down. In the Sattva, we transform who we are. We're no longer any of those. We're operating from a deep spiritual view. And we know that's not easy to do, but that new humanism is not a goal, it's a practice. And all of us have to practice that every day. At least I do, I have to practice that every day. So in this global health awakening, it's a transformation of how we see ourselves, how we see others. That's a prosperity, purpose, people, planet. It's a new way to organize who we are and what we measure. And here's the important thing. It's what we measure that at the end will matter. We count what we count. In every project I do, unless the chief accountant is happy, nothing happens. So I'm thrilled that New Zealand has said, we will measure well-being. We will put that as part of our national accounts and make it real. Part of this transformation, again, I say here is the well-being budget. There's a budget for it. And we need real global organizations that can ensure nation states don't go against their own people. So the concluding thing is, one of my favorite images of Sarkar in meditation is this about the survival of the fittest? And he reframes that, no, this is about a caravan, a journey where no one is left behind. So that's a reframing of what this portal gives us the possibility, but not the certainty. There's many other possible futures. So I hope you join us in this task. I think we're all working together and we all want to move step by step there. For more details on the kind of strategy recommendations, there's this book I did 2 years ago called Prout In Power. What would it look like if this type of way of thinking about the world was actually the way we used to make decisions on a daily basis? Thanks so much for your time. I hope you found that of interest and of use.
YogaEcology is a global movement based on the theory and practice of yoga, that all life emerges from a singular universal consciousness. Let's create a social system based on that idea. You can connect with us via our website, www.yogaecology.org, on Facebook or Facebook Messenger by searching YogaEcology Festival, or you can email us at info@yogaecology.org. Join us in creating a better world for all living beings.